Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now let's meet our guest. I am absolutely thrilled today. We are sitting down with one of the most mysterious and brilliant figures in American literature. For those who may somehow not know who you are you?
To most, I am known as Emily Dickinson, the poet who lived much of her life behind the hedges of a yellow brick house in Amherst. But in my own heart, I was simply a traveler of the mind, capturing the gleam of the world in small scraps of paper.
It is truly an honor, Emily. Let's start at the very beginning. When and where were you born?
I was born on a crisp December day, the 10th to be exact, in 1830. My cradle was in Amherst, Massachusetts, in the very house my grandfather built, known as the Homestead.
And what was your given name at birth?
My parents named me Emily Elizabeth Dickinson.
Is there a story behind your birth name?
Elizabeth was for my mother, Emily Norcross Dickinson. It was a traditional choice, tying me to the lineage of the women before me. Though I often felt like a nobody in the grander social sense, that name anchored me to my family.
What was your hometown like growing up?
Amherst was a quiet, intellectual village. It was dominated by the college and the church. We had the beautiful Pelham Hills in the distance, and a community that was deeply serious about faith and education. It was a place of white steeples and heavy snows.
What was your family life like?
My father, Edward, was a stern but deeply devoted man, a lawyer and a treasurer for the college. My mother was quieter, often busy with the home. I was sandwiched between my older brother Austin and my younger sister Lavinia, whom we called Vinny. We were a close-knit group, even if we were all a bit eccentric in our own ways.
What kind of kid were you?
I was full of Vesuvius at home. I was bright, chatty, and perhaps a bit more observant than was comfortable for the adults. I loved to roam the woods and bring back plants to study. I was a scholar of the meadow before I was a scholar of the book.
What were your biggest fears growing up?
I think, like many, I feared the king in the room. Death was a frequent visitor to New England towns back then. I also feared the loss of my friends. Every time a friend moved away or married, it felt like a little piece of my world was being carried off.
What did you dream of becoming as a child?
I didn't dream of a profession in the way people do now. I simply wanted to understand the why of things. I wanted to be a botanist of the soul, I suppose. I wanted to capture the beauty of a bird or a sunset and keep it forever.
What were some of your favorite activities in school?
I loved my time at Amherst Academy in Mount Holyoke. I was particularly fond of botany and Latin. Creating my herbarium, pressing over 400 specimens of flowers into a book, was a labor of absolute love.
What was your first job?
My job was the care of the household alongside Vinny. I was the primary bread maker. I even won a prize for my rye and Indian bread at the cattle show. There is a certain poetry in the rising of dough, don't you think?
Was there a moment where you realized you were different from everyone else?
It was likely during the religious revivals in Amherst. Everyone was finding their faith and joining the church with such public fervor. I found I could not say the words they wanted me to say. I felt like a bird that preferred the open sky to the cage of a creed.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
Deciding to stay home. It wasn't a grand announcement. I just slowly began to withdraw from the dimity convictions of social calls. It gave me the silence I needed to hear the poems.
What was your biggest break?
In terms of my writing, it was likely my correspondence with Thomas Wentworth Higginson. I sent him 4 poems and asked, "Are you too deeply occupied to say if my verse is alive?" He became my preceptor, even if he didn't quite understand my style.
What were your biggest struggles before success?
Well, success, as the world sees it, didn't come during my lifetime. My struggle was the lack of an audience that understood my slant, rhymes, and my dashes. People wanted poems to be like neat little gardens, and mine were a bit more like a wild forest.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Never. I couldn't stop the poems any more than I could stop breathing. They were my letter to the world. Even if the world didn't write back, I had to keep sending the letters.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you feel are essential to your success?
I rose early to write by candlelight. I found that the world is most honest before the sun comes up. I also spent a great deal of time in my garden. A day without touching the earth or seeing a bee was a day lost.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
I would have been a gardener. My flowers were my first poems, and I think I could have been quite happy just tending to my lilies and ferns for all eternity.
What was your life like before fame?
Since fame came after I was gone, my life was one of quiet intensity. It was filled with baking, writing letters to my dear friends, and watching the seasons change from my window. It was a small life, but it was wide on the inside.
How did relationships change after success?
Success didn't change my relationships because I was already quite tucked away by the time my work was known. But my friendships were my everything. My estate, as I called them.
Did fame bring happiness?
Fame is a fickle food upon a shifting plate. I preferred the solid happiness of a well-turned phrase or a blooming peony.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
For me, it would have been the intrusion. I valued my privacy above all else. I think the glare of the world's eyes would have wilted me.
What misconceptions did people have about you?
They thought I was a melancholic hermit, a myth in white. They didn't see the humor in my letters or the joy I took in a good prank or a clever riddle. I wasn't hiding from life. I was focusing on it.
What was your darkest moment?
The death of my young nephew Gilbert. He was the light of our family, and when he was taken, the world felt very gray for a long time.
What past regrets did you carry that you spoke about?
I often regretted that my father and I couldn't always find the bridge between our hearts while he was alive. He was a man of steely exterior, and we sometimes missed each other in the shadows of the house.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
That my solitude was a cage. It wasn't. It was my workshop. I was busier in my room than most people were in the town square.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong, and how did you handle it?
When my health began to fail, I found it difficult to tend to my flowers. I handled it by leaning even more into my writing. When the physical world narrowed, the spiritual world expanded.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
My sister-in-law, Susan Gilbert Dickinson. She was my most faithful reader, my avalanche of support, and the person I wrote for more than anyone else.
What was life like in your final years?
They were very quiet. I stayed mostly in my room, wearing my white dresses, which I found so practical and pure. I spent a lot of time looking out at the garden and writing on the backs of envelopes.
What were you working on in your career before you passed away?
I was always refining. I was organizing my fascicles, those little hand-sewn booklets of my poems. I wanted them to be ready, even if I didn't know for what.
When and where and how did you pass away, and how old were you?
I passed away on May 15, 1886, in Amherst, Massachusetts. I was only 55 years old.
What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I was a very skilled baker. I used to lower baskets of gingerbread out of my window to the neighborhood children.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
That I only wore white because of a broken heart. While I did have deep loves, my choice of white was much more about my own sense of identity and perhaps a bit of rebellion against the dark, heavy fabrics of the time.
What was your most unique habit?
I would often write poems on the inside of chocolate wrappers or the back of recipes while I was in the kitchen. Inspiration doesn't wait for you to find a proper desk.
What was your favorite food?
Anything from the garden, really. But I did love a good coconut cake.
What was your favorite book?
The Bible was always there, of course, but I adored the works of the Bronte sisters and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Those women had thunder in their pens.
Did you have any known rivalries?
Only with the limitations of language. I didn't have time for rivalries with people. I was too busy trying to capture the infinite in 20 lines of verse.
Tell us a story nobody talks about.
I once had a dog named Carlo, a large Newfoundland. He was my mute confederate for 16 years. We would walk for miles in the woods, and he was the only one who truly knew all my secrets. I missed him terribly when he was gone.
What's your funniest behind-the-scenes moment?
I used to delight in sending my poems with a single flower to friends, sometimes with a very cheeky note. I loved the idea of someone opening a letter and having a piece of the garden fall into their lap.
What advice would you give people chasing success?
Do not chase it. Success is counted sweetest by those who ne'er succeed. Focus on the truth, and let the world find you if it must. The work itself is the reward.
Emily, this has been an absolute joy. Do you have any closing remarks about our interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with our listeners before we sign off?
Only that the world is full of majesty if you only stop to look. Thank you, Calvin, for calling me out of the shadows for a brief chat. It was a lovely day indeed.
Thank you so much for being here, Emily. What an incredible look into the life of a true American original. We talked about her garden, her mysterious white dresses, and that legendary dog Carlo. And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.